Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody, a few people haven't found seats yet. There's 2 or 3 spots at the very front here. 2 for sure, maybe 3. How much any room up there? Don't drop your cake on anybody. One here, second row. Josh, you want to spot here in front? Okay, I think we're mostly settled. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. My name is Devin Weems. Maybe some of you heard this program was originally going to be held outside in the tent in the backyard. And all week long the committee has been watching the forecast and discussing if the weather was going to be a problem. And yesterday morning they pulled the plug on the tent and made a last minute decision to not use that and make adjustments to the weekend accordingly. So I think we're all pretty happy that we made that call. Just a note, if you're sitting in that area of the church, the Zoom recording is happening from that camera, so Hugo, if you have any snarred remarks to make, thanks for the heads up. 100 years? Good start. 100 years of Herschel Abendfeld Mennonite Church. 100 years. Is it a long time? In human years, it seems like a pretty long time. When my great-grandfather, Bernhard Weems, moved here in 1925, he was around my age, so that's 4 generations. Pete Weems, Peter Weems, just turned 91, so he's been around for 91% of those 100 years. I don't know if he feels like it's a long time. Last year, some of us celebrated the 200th anniversary of Beethoven's Symphony No. 9 when it was first performed. This year, many places are celebrating 500 years since the start of the Anabaptist movement in Switzerland. I lived in near Gloucester for a short time, so I use this as a reference. The cathedral there, the construction of there started in 1089, so nearly 1,000 years or 900 years ago, and it took 400 years just to build it. So we'd only be a quarter of the way through construction. Jesus walked on earth 2,000 years ago. For prairie settler history, 100 years is a pretty long time, but for the history of this land and its indigenous inhabitants, it's only a blink of an eye. Regardless, it's a great reason to celebrate, and I'm glad you all came to do that. And we have guests here from British Columbia to Toronto. So thanks for making the effort to come. Our committee has been working hard to plan this event, and we've had a lot of fun and created a lot of excitement in doing so. I just wanted to introduce the committee. Brennan and Kara Weems. I don't know if you can wave. Charlie Cron. Chris and Alice Lee. think they were, well, really suffering with the flu, so they're not here maybe. Gary and Margaret Hugh Peters. My wife Jamae and myself. And the MVP of our committee. Trevor Wilson. Last month, when we were getting down to crunch time and some of us were a little busy in the field, Carla kept prodding and sending emails and sending text messages and keeping things rolling. And her trusty sidekick, Graham, kept doing all the jobs she kept giving him. So thank you. I want to start off with a couple thank yous. Some of you might have seen this quilt here. I'm not really much of a quilt connoisseur. It seems pretty magnificent to me. This quilt was made by Suzanne, who is the resident of Herschel. And when they approached her with the idea of making a quilt, she didn't hesitate and jumped right in and did an amazing job. There's never any Kleenex near me. So, yeah, if you haven't noticed, there is a draw box in the entrance. Make sure you put your name in. This will be given one entry per person. And this will be drawn tomorrow after church, I think, between church and lunch. And so some lucky winner will take home this beautiful heirloom. And then the next thank you. So, yeah, thank you, Suzanne. For 10 years, the church council talked about painting the church. We never seemed to have the energy to do it ourselves, and we were unable to find a painting crew that was willing to come out here and tackle it. And so last time we were like, okay, we really got to get this done before the anniversary. So we got a quote from Saskatoon, and it was $12,000. And we're like, whew, that's pretty steep. Maybe we can do this ourselves. But luckily, I think Chris got in touch with Jared Hine, and he said, yeah, I think I can do that. So he scraped the whole building and painted the whole thing himself. Wow. So, Jared is the son of Leanne Hine, partner of Jeff Weems. Wow. So the church looks great. Thanks, Jared. Now there's a couple more. So at the end of this program, we're going to be watching a video. Last summer, the BD Means clan celebrated 100 years in Canada at our family reunion. And Joanne Means and our cousin Paul put together a video, or a couple videos, highlighting some of the travel, the history of our family, and how we got here, and some excellent drone footage of the Herschel area. And so when we thought about getting a video, Joanne was the first person we approached, and she agreed to do it. So we look forward to seeing that video tonight. So thank you to Joanne. Some of you may have read in your emails, you were asked if you wanted to submit stories, you could submit them in, and Marianne Murray has been kind enough to collect these and put them together. I believe what's going to happen is if you want to have a copy of this, we'll email it out. You give us Carla or me your email address, and we can send this out so you can have the privilege to read those stories. Thank you, Marianne. And Jordan Weems and Linda Bader are going to be leading us, our choir, tomorrow morning. We've got an excellent choir practice already. It sounds good, so we're looking forward to that. Thank you guys for that. And then Peter Yu is donating the sausage for tomorrow's lunch, and Chris and Allison Lee donated the hamburger for tonight's burgers. And then Charlene had a connection at her colony where she teaches. So Sovereign Colony, we were trying to think of making it work via making all these 150 patties, but Charlene said, I think the colony probably has a system. So they made the patties for us and the buns and the radishes, and so yeah, thank them for their help there too. As we gather here today, we acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional homeland of the Cree and homeland of the Métis Nation, for as long as the sun shines, the rivers flow, and the grass grows. So now we will move into our program. What we have tonight is 5 speakers. First one is Bob Clausen, our neighbor right across the yard here. 3rd generation on the yard there, I think. And Brendan found out that Bob had a keen interest in history, and so that worked out pretty good. That got a good head start for us on making a program tonight. So I'll ask Bob to come up and give his presentation.
Thanks, Devin. I think before I start, I'd like to thank and congratulate the committee for organizing this great event. Being their snoopy neighbor, we see a lot of the work. They spend a lot of meetings, spending time trimming trees, mowing grass, doing the steps. They did a great job. I think they deserve a round of applause. I've been asked to give a history of the Herschel Mennonite community with emphasis on the families that settled the Ramsay, Myers, and Lambert farms. In 1924, the Board of Colonization negotiated the purchase of 3 large farms in the Herschel community. During the winter of 1924-1925, 15 families settled on the Ramsay, Myers, and Lambert farms. Henry Penner came to Herschel in the fall of 1924 and settled on Ramsay Farm, which is 1 mile east of where the church is today. They farmed the Ramsay Farm with the lands for some time. By the early 30s, the lands had left the community. The Penners sold some of the land back to Ramsay's and bought a farm southeast of Herschel. Their family continued to farm in this community till the mid-1970s. Jacob Dickman and his wife Anna arrived in Canada in 1924 and came to the Rostron area. Here he came in contact with the Warkentine family of 5 boys, only one of whom, Cornelius, was married. The Warkentines had found a 1 1/2 section farm in the Herschel area, but the owner wanted at least 2 married men in the group purchasing the farm. Thus, Jacob Dickman, along with the 5 Warkentines, bought the Myers farm. This farm is 4 1/2 miles north of where the church is today. The Dickmans and Warkentines farmed this farm until the 1940s, when Dickmans and some of the Warkentines moved elsewhere. C.J. Warkentine and his son continued farming this land until the 1980s. Now I'd like to talk about the Lambert farm. The Lambert farm was 1/2 mile north of where the church is now. The Lambert farm consisted of 5 sections and was purchased by 10 partners. The partners were Bernard B. Weens, Jacob B. Weens, A.K. Clausen, Jacob J. Weens, Ben J. Weens, Peter J. Weens, Maria J. Weens, Gerhard B. Weens, Peter P. Swatsky, and Jacob Isaac. In 1970, my grandfather, A.K. Clausen, wrote a historical sketch of the Herschel Mennonite community, and I would like to think these experiences would be very similar to the other Mennonite families at that time. I'd like to read Grandpa's paper. This is presented by A.K. Clausen, January 8, 1970. I've been asked to give a review of the founding and growth of our Mennonite community here in Herschel. This would take us back to the year 1925, but in reality, the story starts 10 years earlier with the start of the First World War in 1914. With the outbreak of that war, our peaceful life in our homeland Russia came to an end. We were regarded as German citizens and therefore enemies of the state, even though thousands of our men served in the forestry and medical services. The danger of losing our land to the state was ever present. When the Kaiser was overthrown in February 1917, the underlying principles of law were undermined and terror ruled. The climax of this revolution was reached as bands of rebels rode through the villages, stealing, plundering, and murdering. Everyone's life was in jeopardy. Religious instruction in the schools was forbidden, and where the word God appeared in text, Lenin was to be substituted. This forced us to seek a land where there would again be freedom of religion. Immigration from Russia was made possible by the work of devoted men who knew God would guide them every step of the way to obtain visas. They offered encouragement, worked optimistically, and at times risked their lives. Here, the Canadian Mennonite Board of Colonization, under the chairmanship of Bishop David Taves, worked for the admission of the immigrants by the federal government. At the same time, the board was drawing up a contract with the CPR whereby the immigrants would be granted credit for the travel expenses. The CPR expected the immigrants to settle in rural areas, but I must admit this was not always observed. The first immigrants arrived in 1923 and were accepted into Canadian homes. This gave them immediate opportunity to earn money and pay back their fares. In 1924, we arrived in Rostern. The very next day, we found living quarters and I started to look for work. The harvest that year was poor and it was difficult to find work. We did find employment with a bachelor in Aberdeen for $20 a month and a bonus of $1 per day for harvest. The threshing machine often troubled so that we seldom worked a complete day. And since this owner could not see that 2 half days were equal to 1 full day, my bonus was very small. In all, we made $70 in 3 months. We then returned to Rostern to the same house, which was also shared by E. Bergs. Often in the evenings, Mr. Berg and I would go to the board to see Aiden Friesen, member of the study commission. I became acquainted with Brother Friesen in Russia when we both attended teachers' conferences, and this acquaintance blossomed into a deep friendship. Another member of the board is Brother Daniel Enns, also a friend I know in Russia. I make mention of these two persons because they recommended the Lamberg farm to us. Mr. Friesen, who had an understanding of the communities, said repeatedly that in this community we could uphold our traditions and expand our holdings. For these reasons, I became interested in this farm even more so when I was told that 2 smaller farms had already been purchased by other Mennonites. The price was high even by standards that then existed. We had nothing to lose as we didn't have any money. The owner had to pay our fare to Herschel and to establish credit for us at the grocery store. The contract was to include 10 partners. Therefore, I wrote to Ontario to other members of my family who had in the meantime arrived there if they would be willing to join in this venture. As a result, at Christmas time there were 10 partners interested in these 5 sections of land. The day before New Year, Isaac Enns, Garrett Enns, chairman of the board, and I left to inspect his farm. In Saskatoon, as we were changing trains, we accidentally met the Bernard Weens family, who was just arriving from Russia. From Saskatoon, we took another train to Rosestown, and the following day completed our trip to Herschel by rented car. The road was very poor, heavy with snow, and the Ford protested greatly and often stayed stuck. But we did get there. The weather was extremely cold, well below zero. After we had inspected the farm, the house, granaries, and barn, we returned home. That was a comfortable feeling to be able to sit in a warm train. On our return to Ross, we completed the contract the following day and sent it to Ontario for the other signatures. When all signatures were obtained, we and the Bernard Weens family moved. No one who made that trip will ever forget it. It was very cold weather and none of us had suitable clothing. On our arrival in Rosestown, we found we had to wait 23 hours for the train to Herschel. This time we spent in the granary with only a heater providing warmth. On February 11th, 1925, 8 o'clock in the evening, we arrived at the Herschel station. Pat Lamburn was there to meet us. After our belongings were loaded in the sleigh, there was only room enough to accommodate women and children. The men all had to walk. The sleigh barely moved as Pat seemed more concerned about the frost affecting the horses than the cold numbing the women and children. Only after Helen Weens and our Helen, then aged 8, pleaded to be allowed to run alongside to keep from freezing, did he urge the horses on. We all reached our destination. The big house was unfurnished but warm. In the living room was a long table which coffee and sandwiches were served. This had been made for us by Lambert's maid, Audrey Todd. After we had all been seated, she too left, and we were now on our own. I can no longer remember how we spent the first night, but I do know that right after eating, we brought in all our belongings. Next morning, the work on the farm was ours, and Pat Lambert became our advisor. Other than chores, our first concern was to obtain food. According to the contract, we were to receive credit for necessities from him until the first harvest. He drove us to town to Crookshank and Bagley store. After introductions were made, he asked for credit for us, saying he would be responsible for the bills. Both of them refused because his credit was not good. When Mr. Lambert went to the bank, Mr. Crookshank came to me and asked how many persons were involved and said he'd be willing to give us credit on our own merit until harvest time. Most days when it wasn't stormy, Pat and I would try to buy cows and pigs to fulfill the contract demands. It stated each partner was to receive 4 milk cows and 4 pigs, but this goal was not fully reached. Only the cheapest cows are bought, and this resulted in mishaps at milking time, for some cows are so wild it's hard to get near them. This and arranging our living quarters was accomplished during the first winter. Spring was early that year, and on April 10th we started to work the land. For several years we farmed this land together as one unit. The first harvest was excellent with good prices. I believe it was $1.50 a bushel. In the first year, we were able to pay a quarter of our land debt. Of the $160,000 owing, we paid back $44,000 as well as all our other debts. The second year's harvest was not as plentiful. Then came 1927. On August 8th, we had a severe frost which destroyed our whole crop. In 1928, we also had a frost. We harvested only feed wheat. In 1929, a fairly good crop was harvested, but the price had tumbled very low. I had taken a 20 cents advance on a carload of wheat, and shortly afterwards I was notified that the wheat was sold for that price. As far as I can remember, 20 cents a bushel was the lowest price we had ever received. Then came the dry 30s and low dirt, leaving only a little summer fall wheat standing. Prices were also low, and we were unable to meet our expenses, let alone pay any of the land payments. Taxes became outstanding and poverty reigned. I believe if we could compare a pupil's lunch kit of that time with one of today, we would be amazed at that result. And I'm sure it's changed since 1970. I firmly believe that there was much closer fellowship in those days than exists today. Each acquired piece of furniture brought satisfaction, and people rejoiced if you were able to improve your household. When the federal government debt adjustment board had completed its work, we consulted Pat Lambert for individual contracts. By 1934 or 35, this was accomplished. Several families chose to change their contract sale to a rent contract. Others left this community to make their living elsewhere. As a result, the number of families living here in Herschel diminished. The farmers who had decided to remain gained new enthusiasm for their farms. As circumstances also began to improve, land payments could be finalized. It was possible to buy more land, and now we own much more land by far than when we first settled here. In the 1930s and latter years, children of these first settlers became the farm owners, and very little land was sold to outsiders. Just as our standard of living improved, so did our spiritual life grow with the help of God. It is a well-known fact that wherever Mennonites settle, a church soon is found. This was also true in our case. The Canadian Mennonite Board made it possible for a number of families to settle on farms here in Herschel. We felt the need to worship to maintain spiritual growth. This was made possible when Jacob B. and Gerhard B. Leeds came from Ontario on March 19, 1925, and Sunday services were then held in the large Lambert House. At a meeting after Easter, April 13, 1925, the decision was made to organize the congregation under the name of the Abenfeld Mennonite Church. The first wild services were conducted in Lambert House with their father, J.B. Weens, serving as bishop, and G.B. Weens as their minister. Charter members of the Abenfeld Church comprised of families from Lamburn, Ramsey, and Myers Farm. In all, there were 33 members. When it became difficult for the group living in Lambert House to maintain a regular Sunday service, it was decided to alternate with those living at the Myers Farm. On the second day of Pentecost, May 24, 1926, the Brotherhood decided to hold elections. On June 6th, on January 23rd, 1927, C.J. Warkentine was ordained minister and Henry Penner as deacon. At a Brotherhood meeting the same day, the decision to build a church was reached with Brother Peter Clausen to serve as head carpenter. The building project was begun August 1st, 1927. When on August 8th, a severe frost damaged the very promising crop, concerns to postpone the building were heard. The majority feeling was to continue, and by December 11th, the church almost completed was dedicated to the Lord's work. The cost of the building to that date was $3,665. Today, it'd be easy for us to raise that amount of money, but then it was with great difficulty. It should be mentioned that because of the damaged crop, they had to borrow some of the money. Money was borrowed from two local farmers, Richard Henderson and Russell Gardner, and the General Conference. The pews for the church were built during the winter by Brother Abe Warkentine. The floor needed painted, as well as the whole exterior. Plans also included a church barn, but it never materialized, perhaps because the neighbor's barn was too convenient. Any of you parked in that yard over there, and it's quite fine. Although I've talked about these three farms, there were others who came and settled here in person. I would like to say we are reaping the rewards of these people's hardships and sacrifices. And it is important that we remember where we came from and to keep their stories alive.
Thank you very much, Bob. Okay, I think we're gonna sing a couple of songs here. The words will be up here. This is the day, the first one. You're imagining being outside in a tent, so we wanted to pick songs that people were familiar with, and then we're going to sing and rejoice, and so this works out good. This is Curtis Weens.
So I was trying to find the page over here. Oh, we usually, this is on the green book, we usually sing it downstairs. So hopefully it somehow translates upstairs. I don't know, I've never tried before. One other Sunday, okay, we've been singing for a while. Let's stand up to sing together. This is the day that the Lord has made, that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it, and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. Come unto me, O my people, come, O my people, come. Sing praise to Him, I will make you one, I will make you one. Come unto me, O my people, come. Sing praise to Him, I will make you one. This is the day, that the Lord has made. Sing and be glad, for the Lord is good, He's done great things, as He said He would, Sing and be glad, for the Lord is good. He's done great things, as He said He would. This is the day that the Lord has made. Keep going. Behold, the Lord has called His children His own, and with the risen Lord we are living stones, living stones, living stones, to build up the kingdom, living stones. Behold, the Lord has called His children His own, to build up the kingdom, living stones. Behold, what a pleasant and beautiful sight are those who have come from the darkness to light as living stones, to build up the kingdom, living stones. How happy are those come from darkness to light, to build up the kingdom, living stones. Weak and yet strong with the Spirit to lead, we are molded to oneness, a growing seed, living stones, to build up the kingdom, living stones, molded to oneness, a growing seed, to build up the kingdom, living stones. As a kid, we used to sing that song almost every Sunday for Sunday school singing. And I have since then, I don't think I've ever seen oneness used as a verb in any other context than in this song. Anyway.
Thank you, Curtis, for leading us and singing. It's one of my old favorites from Sunday school. So the next portion of the program, we've kind of targeted 4 people, kind of looked at different ages and different generations. We kind of started off with, I think, 4 male Leanses, so we can't do that. So we gotta diversify here. We gotta have some women, we gotta have some other families involved here. So we targeted these 4 people, and they were all willing to share some memories of their growing up in the Herschel Church. The first person is Helen Rempel from Winnipeg, who I'm not sure I've ever met, but I think that was Art's sister, Art's sister. And she was really hoping to come here, but wasn't able to make it. But I think Amy Weens, her great niece, is going to come and share her words with us. And Helen is 99, so 99% as old as the church.
So yeah, hi. As Devin said, I'm Amy Weeks, and I'm reading my great aunt Helen's memories. I wanted to do a bit of a preface. My great aunt included some German words, and my German knowledge is non-existent. So please excuse my pronunciation of this stuff. So here we go. Many good memories come to mind when I enjoy my morning coffee from this mug. It reminds me of the early history of the Ebenfeld Mennonite Church. Its history coincides with my life and early years until 1944. Several groups of Mennonite families arrived in the Herschel area in the 1924 to 1925. Among this group were many young families and numerous young adults and children whose parents had died from typhus and other causes. A Mennonite community came into being. My grandfather, Jacob B. Weeks, who had been an Altester in the Orloff Mennonite Church in Russia, organized this community of new immigrants on Easter Monday, 1925, to become this church whose 100th anniversary we are now celebrating. From a childhood perspective, some of the most memorable events that I recall that took place in the first 2 decades of the church is the community life that was established, serving both the spiritual growth and the social connections. Sunday was a special day, a time of worship and prayer, and after the service to visit and catch up on the happenings to others. We also established connections and friendships in the larger Herschel district. As children, we attended the local schools, and Mr. Henderson and Mr. Gardner, 2 local farmers, lent loans for the building of this church. Community was very important. When one farmer offered a piece of his land for a cemetery, Reverend Weens said, "No, we are welcomed into this community and we want to be a part of it in both life and in death." The early years were difficult. 1926 was an excellent crop year, and another good crop the following year looked promising. They decided to build a church in 1927. However, an early frost that year, rust and hail in 1928, followed by the drought and the depression years in the 1930s, it took until 1944 for the debt of the church to be paid. Church services and Sunday school were held in the High German language, although colloquial language was Low German. It was decided that to children, only the High German would be spoken. During the winter months, on Saturday mornings, children attend German school, learning, reading, and writing in Gothic script. These classes, and also our Sunday school teachers, choir, and song leaders were all men. In church, the men sat on one side and the women on the other. The children sat in the middle pews and were told to sit quietly and listen. I recall passing the time with counting the number of times the minister said, "Teure on diesen day," which means dear people present during the sermon. The pulpit was revered. Only the minister could speak from behind it, and any other announcements or presentations were made from beside the pulpit. Jacob B. Weens was the Altester, and there were 3 lay pastors, George Weens, H. Penner, and H. Flett. Only an Altester could baptize and serve communion. Reverend J. Weens served the 4 Ebenfeld churches in some areas where only a few families lived. Ministers and their wives could travel for free on the CPR, and one year, as a 5-year-old, my grandparents took me with them on a trip to Macklin. In 1939, Reverend J. church members built the coffins, painted them in black, and women lined them with white material. Since he died in Saskatoon, the services of a funeral home and a coffin was needed. The coffin was sent by train to Rosetown and brought to the church with a farm truck. It was a large, sad funeral with many ministers from across the province in attendance. The following 4 years, Reverend J.J. Thiessen came from Saskatoon for baptismal and communion services. In 1943, Reverend C.J. Warren was ordained as an Altester. After the harvest was completed, a Thanksgiving service took place. After the morning service, a fellowship dinner of potato salad, some vegetables, and ham, with cake or cookies for dessert was enjoyed. Coffee was made outside in a large cauldron. This cauldron was used by all farmers for pig butchering day. And also for making soap. After the noon meal, Mission Fest was observed and a guest speaker, a missionary, or someone from the Canadian Mennonite Board of Missions. The highlight of the year was the Christmas season. Christmas carols were learned and sung under the direction of PBBs. Luke 2, 1-20 was memorized, and the excitement built up weeks before the Sunday School Christmas concert on the afternoon on December 24th. In 1942, a Coleman lamp was bought, and the concert could be held Christmas Eve in the evening. Christmas services and festivities were observed on both the 25th and the 26th. On Christmas Day, Good Friday, Easter, and Pentecost, a joint Sunday school with all the generations taking part took place. I recall one Good Friday, my father, J.J. Weeks, was teaching, telling the crucifixion story. A tear rolled down his cheeks. My dad, with tears. Christ suffered and died for us. This has left a lasting and influential impression on me to this day. During the month of July, the Algemene Jugendverein took place. The 4 Evanville churches, Superb, Fisk, Liddon, and Herschel, spent a Sunday together with a worship program in the morning and an outdoor picnic in the afternoon. The churches took turns hosting the event. Even though it has been more than 80 years since I attended the Herschel Mennonite Church, I have fond memories of the church's ministry, which influenced my life. I was baptized and joined the church in 1943. I transferred my membership to Bethel Mennonite Church in Winnipeg in 1952. That was also the year Arthur Renko and I were married. 2 of the most important events in my life took place at the Herschel Evanville Mennonite Church. Much more could be written about the first 20 years of the church's existence in the Herschel community. May it continue to be a blessing to all who come to worship there. May it continue to be a light in the Herschel community and beyond.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks, Helen, for sending those words to us. We really appreciate your contribution to the program. Our next speaker is Rudy Weems.
I'll just begin by saying that song Living Stones chokes me up. I just think of Joe Fair. His favorite song, and I always want to sing it on Sunday mornings in the basement. I was asked to share some my perspective of the church's history from the viewpoint of one of the older generations. Since I was born in 1945, so I've been around for about 80% of the churches. Can't claim 99. I can't disagree with being categorized in this way, but it is a sobering thought, especially in the things that are happening more and more frequently. I am trying to adjust to that. My first recollections of the church are of us boys sitting on a bench along that wall there, which used to be the west wall of the church, and now it's the north, before the church was moved in 1966. In those days, the church was, the sanctuary was the same size as it was now, but when they moved the church, they added They doubled the size of the foyer and made it a little larger. But of course, the community of people was much larger than it is now. The church was full. I don't know I don't remember it being overflowing, but I know it was very much busier than in recent years. Another feature of the old building was that it had an attached side entrance to what was then the east side of the building, right over there where Leanne and Peter John are sitting. That was the men's entrance to the church sanctuary, and also the big stairs down to the basement. As was mentioned, the married couples did not sit together during the church service. The men sat on one side and the women sat on the other. That was it was us kids on the bench on the side until we grew a little bit older, and then we sat on the middle row in the middle row of benches. I think the girls maybe were allowed to sit there earlier than we were. I'm not sure. This seating rule held firm until Albert and Katie Weems were married and broke the mold by sitting together during worship services. And gradually over the years, other couples followed, and today the whole idea of segregated seating is completely in the past. Sometime later, this seating evolved into 3 rows of benches from 2. And I may be wrong, maybe it was 3 all along, but I remember us youngsters sitting in the middle section of the benches. There were quite a lot of us. 4 of us boys were born in 1945, with a number of others a bit older and a bit younger. And I imagine we must have been quite a handful at times. Speaking of the other ones, of course. I remember occasions during the worship services when one of the adult men, one of the father or uncle, would slide into a bench behind us and tap on the shoulder, or gently twist an ear, or a knips on the back of the skull, would remind us to quiet down and pay attention. Of course, all the services were conducted in the German language at that time. All the singing by the congregation and the choir were in German, as well as were the business meetings. Over the years, this has gradually evolved to pretty much exclusively English, with just the very occasional singing of a German song or a German reference in our church today. I think for most of us, German was the first language we learned at home, which then, of course, gave way when we went off to school. During church service, the practice was to stand whenever we were praying, and we would sit when we sang, which is the opposite of today. What we do today makes a lot more sense. It's better to sing standing than sitting. We had a large choir, as Amy mentioned, led by P.D. Weems, and then later by his son Albert. All of us youngsters, or most of us, were expected to participate. I think some of us boys started in the soprano section of the choir and then gradually moved on to alto, bass, tenor, and then bass as our voices changed. While the church was smaller, the size of the church community was much larger. I don't remember it being really crowded, but I think it was pretty full. I remember that on days when we had a communal meal, such as Thanksgiving in church, there were 2 settings. One, the adults would eat first, and us kids had to wait our turn. So we played outside or upstairs until the adults were done, and then it was our turn to eat. The position of pastor was not a salaried position as it is now. The pastor was chosen by the congregation, and he began an entirely volunteer position. When I think back on this, I am overwhelmed with a feeling of gratitude for the sacrifices these gentlemen and their families made to serve this congregation. I believe this is a common thing in other congregations as well, but the responsibility of preparing a weekly sermon for the Sunday morning service, as well as other special occasions, and performing other leadership functions for the congregation while running a farm operation must have been a significant burden to carry. I'm not sure about this, but I don't think there was even a token remuneration for out-of-pocket expenses such as gasoline. I do remember that our congregation collected money and gave a gift of a trip to the Holy Land for Art and Lila Weems in appreciation for their service. I also remember once Werner Zacharias, speaking from that pulpit there, mentioned the volunteer nature of being a pastor. I don't know if he was complaining or not, but anyway. He asked if anyone here had offered to do some farm work for Art so that he could work on sermon preparation. After a brief silence, Rod Weeds put up his hand and said, yes. The finances of the church were different as well. The collection plate that was passed around was populated with $1 and $2 bills, unlike today where almost everything is done by check or e-transfer. Sunday school was well populated. There were a lot of us kids. For at least a few years, there was an arrangement in the basement where there were several Sunday school rooms whose walls would drop down and be converted to tables, an effective solution to a congestion problem. Church life was much more formal in those days. There was no formal dress code, but all the men, from teenagers and older, were expected to wear a shirt, tie, and a jacket on Sunday morning. All the women wore dresses or skirts. Slacks would not have been an option. Likewise for men, no blue jeans or other casual wear. I remember as a kid, one of my jobs Sunday morning was to polish all the shoes in our family before going to church. That was serious business. Life was hard. It's all three of us in those days. Communion was a very much more formal and special occasion. A separate service in the afternoon or evening. When you were taking communion, you were expected to be extremely careful not to touch the communion bread with your fingers. You had to have a white handkerchief to hold the bread until you ate it. Only the presiding minister was allowed to touch it. I feel that the way we practiced church in the old days was appropriate for the times and for the people that our parents were and that we were. I also feel that the evolution of our church practices relating to language and rituals has also been appropriate in order to keep step with current societal patterns. Before I close, I want to mention one other theme in our church's history that I think is a very important part of our story. Art Weeds once used the phrase, quote, being as proud as a Christian can be without seeming silly. And I think many of us in this church feel this way about our history of refugee sponsorship. Because every one of the original members of this group came to Canada as refugees, a very strong theme of responsibility to, quote, pay it back has persisted in our group. Pardon me. Resulting in an active refugee sponsorship focus starting after World War II and continuing until recently, as outlined by some previous speakers. These sponsorship events have been a rich experience for our congregation. We made new friends from far-flung parts of the globe, learned a lot about different cultures, partnered in sponsorship with churches in Rosetown, and felt that we have made a significant difference in the lives of several families. In closing, I wanted to share a couple of quick anecdotes generated by the culture shock that these families experienced, as I'm sure our parents and grandparents experienced when they were new refugees. The first incident was with the Hodai family. Our group had gone to considerable trouble to furnish the old Jeffrey house for their arrival, and including enough beds for the entire family, only to discover that they preferred to sleep on the floor. The second incident, when the Zerbu family arrived in Saskatoon, it was late at night, maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, as their plane had been delayed for several hours. When they came off the plane, all of us on the committee were there and anxious to hug them and shake their hands and be super friendly. The problem was that Moina, the wife and mother, was a devout Muslim, and in that faith it is strictly forbidden for her skin to touch the skin of any other man besides her husband. So here was poor Moina with her dress sleeve pulled down over her hand, trying to shake hands with everybody without offending us and being distant. I note later when we got them to Rosetown and she saw the house that they would be living in, I saw her break down and cry and give Margaret a big hug The house was average by our standards, but a huge improvement over their lives in the refugee camp in Turkey. And lastly, Jamal and Leah, that was the second last couple that we sponsored, came from Bosnia, Croatia. A part of the world where the population is much more dense than here, especially Herschel. And the house we had for them to live in was situated on the south side of Herschel, overlooking a small backyard with grass and a bare summerflower field. And they were used to beautiful mountains and forests and the Adriatic Sea and a picturesque place. So one day, a couple of days after they arrived here, Jamal was looking sadly out the window, and he said to his wife, "Well, Leah, I guess it's just you, me, and the cows." So that's my recollection of church life. Thank you for letting me share it with you.
Thank you, Rudy. And thank you for all the work you've done with the Refugee Sponsorship Program. Okay, let's take another break here and sing a couple more songs. We'll get Curtis up here. The first one is Unity.
All right, sure, let's stand again. Thank you. Lord, help us live in peace. From our blindness, set us free. Fill us with your healing love. Help us live in unity. Many times we disagree. Or what's right or wrong to do. It's so hard to really see from the other's point of view. How we long for power and fame, seeking every earthly thing. We forget the one who came as a servant, not a king. Lord, help us live in peace. From our blindness, set us free. Fill us with your healing love. Help us live in unity. Sounds nice from up here. Sounds nice from back there. Okay, now so Rudy wasn't mentioned Joel. I remember this being another one of Joel's favorites as well. So, sing this one a lot of times. Has a lot of different parts to it. Okay, so try to keep on. Thousands were praying, and thousands rejoicing, and all
Plus you had a banjo singing Sunday school every week. That's great. Okay, our next speaker is getting closer to my age here, Karen Cron.
Mine's gonna go a little differently. I've got some quick memories that I'm just gonna hit, and I know that there's gonna be some people that have these same memories. So going to DVBS every summer, so my cousins would come out, people in the community would attend, and there are still echoes of "I'm fresher than you are" ringing in my ears. So we would play Prisoner's Base back there, and I don't know who was the fastest, like I wanna say like Jeff, I think Chris was pretty fast, Kent Weems maybe, I'm not even positive, but I know there was a strategy. So if one of the fastest guys got tagged, then people like me and Carolyn would go get caught, see if you can get somebody, but get caught because then the line stretches out longer and you can get the fastest guy out running faster. What fun we had at GBS. It was fun. So also going to the North American Conference with Carolyn and Art and Lila. So we went to Bethlehem in his new diesel truck. And I think that confused a lot of people because it's like, how are you gonna get to Bethlehem in a diesel truck? Well, it's Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And we took the diesel truck with the camper on behind. And I was talking about this before, but I'm gonna mention it again now, when we're sitting up here, that during our trip out, we drove out and something happened that we ran into, like, I don't know if an accident, and slowed our process right down. And we had made plans to stop in Cincinnati to watch the Expos, that tells you how old I am, watch the Expos play the Reds at Riverfront Stadium. And we were far away still the day of that. So Art got up really early in the morning, packed up the camper, and we drove to Cincinnati to watch that baseball game. And I don't think, looking back now, I don't think Art and Lila were huge baseball fans. Maybe they were. I'm sure that was done for me, which was greatly appreciated. So also singing in the choir and, you know, in the soprano area here, and Albert going, Karen, Charlene, whoever you are, I need you to sing that line, or can you move over there? And it would be like, but Albert, I'm Karen. And then knowing that, you know what, he knew who we were, it just didn't matter, he just wanted the notes right. And Charlene and I might be a little, you know, we were offended, no, we weren't. And then we would, like, you know, head out or whatever, and John Clausen would come up to me and go, hello, Charlene. I love that man, John Clausen. Man, Carolyn and I were baptized in grade 12. I don't know that, I mean, we wanted to get baptized, but that was the last year that Art was doing any baptisms in this church. And it's like, no, I want to be there. And I just saw a picture in that photo album of Carolyn and I, and then Dwight and Shirley. So I don't know, I think Dwight might have been baptized with us and Shirley moved membership. I don't know, if there's any Sawatsky person here, maybe they know, I don't know. But I was like, oh yeah, that's right, they were up here with us. That was good. And I remember getting a white handkerchief from my grandmother to use, as Rudy was talking about, so I could hold the, and I didn't know that because again, kids weren't allowed at communion earlier. Also, I got whenever you would get a compliment from Ruby Sawatsky about what you were wearing, you knew you made it. She had great taste, and they didn't come often, but every once in a while she'd be like, I really like that sweater, Karen. And I was like, yes, I made it. Oh yeah, I never have moved my membership from this church. I'm still a member here. I, again, baptized in grade 8 or grade 12, so that was in 86. Never moved it because, and I've attended a few churches since then, none of them have felt like home, so I had no interest in moving my membership. So when we were at university, I guess, we invited a friend out, and New Year's Eve was at Rudy and Joey's, and there was a whole bunch of people there. And I just remember she came, and I think it was Tim and maybe Bill, I'm not sure, who Rod might have been there, and we played Kaiser, I'm gonna say like all night. And she came back the next year because it was so much fun, and she was so warmly welcomed by the people at that, which are people, you know, my people from this congregation, so thank you for that. When I started dating Harold is 6'2", and he asked me if his height intimidated me, because some nurses in the ER said that, you know, you're really tall, so you intimidate me. And I'm like, no, why would that matter? He goes, well, I'm pretty tall. I'm like, I grew up with a bunch of tall guys. I want to say there's something in the water here, but there's a lot of tall guys that I grew up with. That was never an intimidating factor. Another great summer memory is practicing for the choir for the Algemeinde. I mean, that's how you say the beginning of that, is Algemeinde. It was great. We would get up here, we would practice, getting all those churches together, all those voices together. It might kind of sound like tomorrow morning, maybe, if you guys are here. I think it's going to be great. But singing in that choir, with all of these people, getting together with those churches, playing ball, eating Lila's pie for lunch. Sorry, Mom, I had to say it. Lila made really good pie. And just having fun all afternoon, whether it was at the fairgrounds, the Fisk School, and the Brome in Superb, is that right? Like, it was so much fun, and that was all of us and those other churches. I mean, we were the Ebenfelds. It was great. One of the things that made the biggest impression on me was singing in the choir. So of course, it was expected that you would sing in the adult choir once you moved on. I always sang soprano, so I didn't have to move into the tenor and bass areas. So when I moved to Oklahoma City, I was 20 years old, and the church that I attended for that year had a choir. So I joined the choir immediately and made some great friendships. Came back, went back to university in Saskatoon, attended Newtown Park, started singing in the choir, met all sorts of people. Even now, I go back and these are the people I still see. Not necessarily a whole bunch of friends our age, but people who were in the choir at that time, and they still know you and love you. I think, because I love them, that's for sure. The choir was a big, big thing. When I moved to Calgary, I went to Foothills, joined the choir immediately, and it was so much fun. Just, those were, again, my people. You knew that these people, there was something about singing that just made everybody good. Herschel has always been about helping people out. When Dad had his back surgery, I was living in Calgary the first time around, so 92, 91, he had back surgery, and he got a bone infection. And so he was laid up for January, most of February. Well, that's when you haul grain. So Dave Fair organized all the men to come to the farm and haul the grain. They hauled enough grain to fill an entire grain car in Herschel, and there were so many men that even chop was made to feed the cows for like the next 6 weeks or 2 months. So everything was taken care of, so he didn't have to worry about anything. And that is the Herschel Church. There's lots of other stories that people will tell you, and we always got together and we always had each other's backs. And that's why I love this church, because I'm always warmly welcomed home.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, there is a certain, once you become a choir person, you're always a choir person, I think. Next up, we have our youngest member of our group, Josh Lee, who's gonna come up and share some of his memories. I think he has some memories of his grandpa's too. Oh, this is okay, this is all his own.
Can you tell I'm nervous? Good evening, everybody. Take it easy on me up here. I'm not a big public speaker. I was voluntold to do this by my father. So if you don't like the speech, it's 100% Chris Weed's fault. My name is Josh Weed, and I grew up on the wheat farm a couple miles south of the church. From a young age, I remember the Herschel Church and the corresponding community being an integral aspect of my life that has prolonged to the present day. The church has provided myself countless memories such as singing in the children's choir, going to a daily vacation Bible school in the summer, going to the Weems farm, and I should clarify, that's not the Tim and Levon Weems farm. That's not the Devin and Janae Weems farm. That's not the Pete and Leona Weems farm. Who else do we have? It's not the Brennan and Carol Weems farm. That's the Rod and Lori Weems farm. And playing sports and video games with Ryan. Acting in the Christmas play, the endless potlucks, and the uncountable number of conversations had and relationships built with members of the church. I actually have another memory that I just thought of while sitting there. It would have been 2019, I think, and Bernie Weems was leading the sermon, and I was sitting in the back, and I had long hair at the time, and he's talking about whatever he was talking about. I can't remember the topic. He stops and he says, "Josh, I want to know your opinion." And I kind of look around shocked, and he said, "You're a young guy with long hair. I know you have an opinion." I think I booked the haircut the next day. It's no secret that the advent of community is incredibly important to all of us here. If it wasn't important, I wouldn't be up here speaking, and you wouldn't be sitting here listening. At some point in our lives, the church and its community has had a lasting impact on you as it has for myself. The relationships made through this community continues to be invaluable in my life. These relationships provided me the opportunity to help Jordan Weems with a political campaign, that's Tim and Levon Weems' son, and work at a law firm with Matthew Weems, Rod and Lori's son. They manifest themselves in simply stopping and having a conversation when I see members of the community in Saskatoon, such as the Wilson family when me and Brent are running laps around the Saskatoon Fieldhouse track. If I wasn't a member of the Herschel Church, I would have never gone to Roston Junior College and met many lifelong friends. I would have never got more involved with music and choir. I wouldn't have gone on a service trip to Alabama or won a provincial football championship. I'm deeply thankful for these opportunities and experiences. This community has helped shape my values and worldviews. I've learned about the importance of being a helping hand, giving back to your community, being open-minded and respectful to each other's differences. I've learned about not forgetting your roots and remembering where you came from. I've learned about the value of expanding your horizons and the value of not seeing the world as simply black and white. I apologize in advance. I'm sure you weren't expecting or hoping for a legal lecture, and I promise I'll tie this back into the relevant topic. But there's a foundational constitutional legal principle in Canada called the Living Tree Doctrine. This doctrine arose from the Persons case, a landmark case that every Canadian should know. In the 1920s, five women, now known as the Famous Five, petitioned for a definition of a provision within the Constitution which only allowed qualified persons to be eligible for the Senate. The Canadian Supreme Court held that the definition of persons contained only men, as that was the purpose when the Constitution was founded in 1867. In an appeal to the Privy Council of Britain, Lord Sankey reversed the decision, famously stating that the Constitution is a living tree capable of growth and expansion within its natural limits. This established that the Constitution evolves and grows alongside the progression of society. It's hard to believe that only 100 years ago, women's rights were still being debated at the most fundamental levels. The Living Tree doctrine transcends the Constitution. It is enveloped with the general principles of equity, inclusion, and progression. It is a doctrine that can be easily applied to communities and institutions such as the church. This church and community has done a tremendous job of progressing alongside society while making their members feel truly welcome. That kind of growth, staying rooted in love while expanding with the times, is a living tree in action and a reflection of Jesus' teachings like loving your neighbor. This church and community has sponsored refugees, gone on service trips, helped its members, and been inclusive to everybody. These are the strengths of our church and our community. Overall, if the Herschel Ebenfeld Mennonite Church didn't exist, I'm sure my life and your lives would look substantially different. The sharing of individual memories is exciting. It's a fun time to reminisce on times past and share stories about important and notable events in our lives. I look forward to hearing these stories from all of you throughout this event and during the rest of the weekend. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Josh. That was fantastic. It is nerve-wracking no matter what, so you have good words to share with us. Thank you. Okay, we'll follow that with another song. Chris, you want to lead us? This one is not in Sing and Rejoice. We were thinking of campfire songs, and this is one of the less depressing ones, so.
Alright, church in the wild, let's stand to sing. There's a church in the valley by the water, no lovelier song in the day. Those voices of tears in my childhood
No, okay. So, yeah, we're moving, time is going by here. So next part of the program is the video that Joanne Means has prepared for us, so we'll play that now. And if anyone wants to see it again, or isn't here, it'll be played tomorrow after lunch. And I think there will be a link sent out that you can also watch at home. I've heard watching it multiple times is quite necessary because there's a lot of stuff in there. So here we go. Someone want to hit the lights at the back?
First of Avonfield Mennonite Church. For generations, a beacon, a well of wisdom, humility, service, compassion, and countless forms of worship for God. A form of faith community difficult to describe in any amount of words. But if you've been here, you know. If you've been here and fully experienced here, you know. How many eyes have laid upon Psalm 119, verse 105? Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light for my path, in German or in English. A small piece of scripture so central to our church's mission. I pray this verse will remain with all of us, always.
My first recollection of the church is everything was in German. The women sat on the left, the men on the right. I was baptized in the church by Art Weeds in 1972 and got married in the church in 1978. A person that stood out to me a lot was Pete Weeds. He was always so friendly with my husband, who had a very strong French accent and didn't speak English very well. He always made him feel so at home.
Born in May of 1934, I suppose my mom dragged me to church.
We were welcomed by the elder, Mr. Wharton, and Art's dad, Jakob Pins. Everybody was in a jubilant mood. They had just had a drenching 3-day rain, which we could use right now. And the first thing they taught us, you never go into the house with the outside shoes. Yeah, in Germany it's all paved, but and Highway 31, it looked like a mud trail to us. It was really, really close. And my mother, who didn't know any English, she was overjoyed that everything was in German. They all talked perfect German. Church was all in German. And she hardly knew that she had left Germany. Yeah, and the other points, what have I got written down? Oh yeah, they would invite us after the church service, the different Mennonite women, and we would get the canned chicken out of the jar. There were no fridges, you know, and the fresh made buns, and the cool milk out of the ice house. Any of you young folk, if you don't know what an ice house is, ask your parents or your grandparents. Yeah, they were so good to us. I know Mr. Peter Sawatsky, he took my mother and said, he said that in German, but most of you don't know any German, which is too bad. Chrysler, if you need anything, come to thee. And the Sawatskis gave us a pig to butcher, and they gave us a milk cow for the 5 kids. And Dad, well, he soon taught us kids to milk that cow. I was 11 at that time. And one way we could reciprocate for the music-loving Rangers, among other things, my parents had brought a hand-wound gramophone, classical music, Beethoven, Bach, Schubert, Mozart. The Weeders would come to listen to the music. Yeah, yeah. And then the following year, the Wheelers came, and I think they were with your parents for several days. And that was a family. 6 months. How long were they with you?
6 months.
Really? Share your house?
Yeah.
Well, that is, that is living the Christian faith. And then the Andres newlyweds, they were already mentioned on the video. They stayed with Abraham Klassen and Lena Klassen a 3/4 year. And they were visiting somewhere, and somebody asked Lena, "Who are these two with you?" Lena said, "Das sind meine Kinder, they are my children." Yeah, just a perfect relationship, just so wonderful. Yeah, and then the only thing that could have been that, oh no, I still have to mention Peter you. The Mennonite men, they were able to get a half section to rent for my dad, but he had no machinery. How can you farm with no machinery? And Bernie's dad, Jake Weens, he came to sow a field to wheat. A field that had lots of rocks. That poor one-way, he jolted up, smashing down onto the next rock, and wheat flying out of the seed box, But he finished that field. And then a little bit of luck sometimes in life is good too. On that half section that my dad rented, there was some crested wheat. And we had snow galore in those years and ample rainfall. And crested wheat only needed to be harvested. But how can you harvest it when you haven't got a combine? John P. Waynes, Peter Yu, who's with us here, his dad, together with Peter Yu, who was a teenager, possibly 17, 18, they worked for 2 days changing their 17 Massey Harris combine from pickup to straight cut header. And combine, very difficult to combine, much more difficult than combining wheat. And that paid for the half section over the years, several crops, for the purchase of that half section. And Chris and Ellie are still living in that half section, yeah. And that house still stands there to this day. And my dad, he had never built anything. They moved into the house, but there was no kitchen cover. They had ripped it out. He had to build, that's the first thing he built was kitchen cupboards, and they're still in there. They're still in there. And about the only thing that could have been even better, I still feel that's too bad, that none of the Wings married the Wings.
Okay, thank you, Rick. You got your wish. So that's the conclusion of our program this evening. Tomorrow, I think Jordan's asked, will we meet here at 9:30 for choir practice if you're in the choir? I was going to say church starts at 10:30 for those of us that regularly come at 1 minute after church starts. We probably want to be a little earlier tomorrow. The parking will be a little bit more challenging than normal. Yeah, I think that's it. So thank you all for coming and thanks for everyone who contributed.